Good morning, 7 East. It is Wednesday, my dudes, on this 30th episode of LEPRE Radio, a nice round number, the big 030. I am your host, Mr. LEPRE. We are on the air for this shorter episode of LEPRE Radio. We don't have the arduous journey of the Oregon Trail today. We just have a straightforward, content-based lesson for you today on this exciting radio show. On Wednesday, this is our agenda. We're talking about building up American transportation networks, Oregon Trail, National Road, Erie Canal, early railroads, and so on. Also, I'm inviting you to continue playing the Oregon Trail. There is no new assignment today. I still have it in my mind to do some kind of a contest to see who can get the highest score. I have to figure out a way to do that to make sure everyone's playing honestly and not just copy and pasting high scores from Google Images. I'll see how I can work that out in the coming days, but you continue playing today if you want. That link is on Classroom from yesterday. Here is our agenda for today, May 6th. Oregon Trail update. I have an exciting Oregon Trail update first. Second, Transportation Nation. It's all about the transportation networks that connected the United States together. And last but not least, animal news. Some really shocking and, quite honestly, haunting animal news for you today. Some of it hits close to home, as you'll see. But our Oregon Trail update, following my embarrassing performance yesterday. If you were in the Google Meet yesterday, you will have been with me when I was able to beat the game. Granted, I was playing on easy difficulty, but no victory comes without sacrifice. So no sacrifice, no victory, in the words of Sam Witwicky from the Transformers movies. I think everyone on my crew died except for me. And I think we had some kind of a record because we got bit by, it seems, over 15 snakes. As you can see just from this transcript on the left. Jed bitten by a snake on August 20th, 3 days later. He was bitten by another snake. Henry was bitten by a snake. Beth had the measles. And then Beth was bitten by a snake too. You can't make this stuff up. All these snakes, you'd figure we were in the Well of Souls from Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But in the end, this is the screen you get when you win, when you beat the game. Congratulations, you have reached the Willamette Valley in Oregon. I feel somewhat proud. It would make 8-year-old me much prouder. I remember playing that when I was in elementary school. But finally, I made it to Oregon. I can rest easy. In memoriam for Guy Fieri, Gordon Ramsay, Dr. Phil, and Steve Harvey, who did not make it with us. So now getting into our content-based stuff for today. You may not know this, but the USA is approximately 3,000 miles across. Now, in case you're not aware, that is a very large number, and it is a very long journey for you to make. Even on foot. Forrest Gump ran back and forth across the country a few times. That was only in the movies. And this leads us to today's big question. How does a country make sure it has control over all its land? Let's go back to that map. How does America make sure it has control over all this land? You may not know this, but most of the western half of the country is empty. If you were to see a map showing the lights and the electricity use throughout the country, on the right side, on the east side of the Mississippi River, you would see a very bright country because of all the people that live there. Left side, not so much. West Coast is the exception along with Texas, but right in the left side there, it would seem pretty empty. So how does a country make sure it has control over all this land? That is today's big question, and today's big answer, to put it simply, is by having both the population and the ways to get back and forth from all areas of the country. So you want to make sure you have people to actually put in these places to make sure that you're still in charge of it. And you also want to have a way to get people there. In a word, you need to have transportation to get people back and forth from all areas of the country. If there is a rebellion in some state, you want to be able to send the army over there to stop it, to make sure you keep control. Well, what do those transportation networks look like? Well, if you were to look at the United States in 1840, this is kind of what you would see in terms of American transportation. Basically nothing out west and everything on the east side. So you can see from the key in this map, we have the roads in red, we have the canals, which are the artificial rivers. In blue, we have some of the early railroads in yellow. Railroad is a recent invention. The first locomotive wasn't invented until 1814. So the trains are really not that popular yet, but they're going to explode in popularity soon. And then the dotted line, you have the National Road. That was America's first major centralized highway, getting you from one end of the country to the other back then. And let's go kind of just give you a preview of each, because tomorrow's assignment's focusing on the Erie Canal, and then we'll do the railroads next week. But if you look on the left, really the only two ways to travel out west back then were either take the Oregon Trail to the northwest or the Santa Fe Trail down to the southwest. Two roads to follow, whereas on the East Coast you have all these options, and it should be not surprising that most of the population was on the East Coast. So the National Road. So some facts about the National Road. 620 miles long. Took from 1811 to 1837 as part of like Clay's American system. They wanted to build up American transportation to help with trade. If there is this road that is clean and travelable, then it makes it a lot easier to do business. So the National Road helps with that. And you can see how it connects. You can go all the way from the Atlantic Ocean, Baltimore. So let's say you set sail from England, you land in Baltimore, you could take the National Road all the way out to St. Louis, Missouri. So the National Road, kind of our first highway. And if you were to look at it today, the National Road has actually been extended. So the National Road originally was only like the first third on the right, but today it extends. It is now Route 40. So if you want to travel the National Road one day, maybe when you graduate high school or on a college road trip, you can go from East Coast to West Coast along the National Road, Route 40. It'll take you right across the middle of the country. That would be a fun thing to do over a summer vacation one day. I'll keep it in mind. Oregon Trail, obviously. So Oregon Trail, once you got out west, remember the National Road only ended in St. Louis, so you'd have to get to St. Louis, cross Missouri, get to Independence, and then you would be able to follow the Oregon Trail. Much more difficult to travel than the National Road, but it was one of two main paths leading you fully out west, Oregon Trail and Santa Fe Trail. And here we have some scenic painting of the wagons and oxen leading the way on the Oregon Trail. We have the game we played yesterday, a lot of good memories, sometimes bad memories. That snake is upsetting me in the middle, as we're going to find out why soon. And this is from the original game. If you died of dysentery, you would get this disheartening message. There's other ways you could have died, though, in the game. Cholera, typhoid, starvation, breaking a leg, getting bitten by a snake, drowning, like all of my crew died in the earlier episode. Erie Canal. So remember, a canal is an artificial river. So the Erie Canal, which is going to be the subject of tomorrow's assignment, it's basically you're digging a hole in the ground, an artificial river. So for the Erie Canal, what they basically did was dig a giant ditch across the Hudson River and linking it up with other rivers and lakes across New York until they got to Lake Erie. So you could actually travel by boat all the way from the Atlantic Ocean if you sailed from the Atlantic up the Hudson River, along the Erie Canal, and then you end up in Lake Erie. It made travel so much easier than it would have been before. And here's just a wider view map, so it shows how you can come in from the Atlantic into New York City, up the Hudson, and then sail across all of New York, end up in Lake Erie, and it connects you with the Midwest. And this shows you how you can actually travel from New York City to Chicago by water back then. You could not do that before the Erie Canal. So the red is everything you can travel by water. You can get on a boat once, you never have to get off. Before the Erie Canal, you would have to get off the boat, travel by land to get to the Great Lakes. Then we have the Transcontinental Railroad, which we're going to be doing next week. Railroads are a new invention, as I mentioned. 1814, the first locomotive is invented, and that technology takes a while to catch on. It's very expensive, and you need a lot of people to work on these. But the first Transcontinental Railroad is the first railroad built from one end of the country to the other. So the Transcontinental Railroad is the one that is in orange and green right here. That's going to link East Coast and West Coast, and at that point, the Oregon Trail is really not used anymore. Who wants to travel by wagon and ox when you can just take the train? And that's what's going to happen. But that only happens in the late 1800s when it gets finished in the 1860s. So that is it for our transportation networks. All of those are going to be necessary to stitch this country together and make sure that the West can be settled. Tomorrow, you're going to be dealing with the Erie Canal and then the Transcontinental Railroad next week. But now, last but not least, we have our fun segment of the day, animal news. Some of the news is just shocking. I don't even remember all the stories, so let's dive in. Oh, yeah, this is my personal experience. Snakes on a trail. Not snakes on a plane, there's snakes on a trail. Like I said, I had probably the worst luck ever in an Oregon Trail game. At least 15 snake bites. And this entire time period here in late August was just ridiculous. Over the course of a week, I had some people bitten by snakes twice. So snakes, watch out for the snakes on the Oregon Trail. I think that happens especially if you're moving at a grueling or fast pace. So be careful of the snakes. The snakes are attacking along the Oregon Trail. As Woody from Toy Story once said, there's a snake in my boots. So make sure there isn't a snake in your boots or your wagon. Otherwise, your sailors are going to get bit along the way and won't make it. Story number 2. This is unintentionally funny. New Jersey man attacked by squirrel while taking the trash out. There is a police dispatch which I listened to, and it is low-key extremely funny because they talk about the perpetrator, whether the perpetrator, meaning the squirrel, is still on scene or not. Apparently the guy was taking out the trash, the squirrel scratched and bit him on his face. He's probably going to have to get checked out at the doctor for that. It's in New Jersey, so not too far. Be careful around the squirrels. They might be getting as desperate as we are. Last but not least, the most terrifying animal news story of the week. I've seen the video. It really is terrifying. Check it out at your own discretion. But video shows monkey attempt to kidnap child while riding a tiny motorcycle. So I can't remember what country this was in, but I don't think it was the United States. And the video's on YouTube, I'm sure. There is this monkey riding a mini motorcycle, and it goes into this alley, jumps off the motorcycle, grabs a toddler. The child could not have been more than 2 years old, and started dragging her. I think it was a girl, and started dragging her across the street, leaving the motorcycle behind. It was shocking. It was terrifying. It was almost Harambe 2.0. But both the child and the monkey made it out safe. That does it for our animal news of the week. Weird news, you're going to have to wait for that on Friday. There won't be an episode of Free LEPRE Radio tomorrow because we have a video for the Oregon Trail. Weird news coming your way on Friday. And that's going to do it for this episode of Free LEPRE Radio. This is going to be Mr. LEPRE zooming back to the beginning to our on-air sign and signing off.